Hello and welcome back. In this video, I want to go over the Bone Tyrant subclass tree. Bone Tyrant is, well, interesting to say the least. It is a extremely defensive option with a couple of very good active skills and some very strong passives. This tree, however, falls into a problem of most of the buffs in this tree can be found in other places easier and most of the time in a better option. There are really three main reasons you'll be taking Bone Tyrant. Bone Tyrant's main thing is the ability to absorb dot damage better than any other skill line, its ability to generate unique ultimate, and its extremely good defensive options. Starting off with the active skills, we have Death Scythe. Scythe is your burst heal, and while it's very strong, it does come with a couple of downsides. Scythe and its morphs are a melee ability that is effectively a cone in front of you. If you don't hit anything, you will not heal. Additionally, the base heal for hitting one target, while good enough for most situations, isn't actually that strong. All of this combined makes a very weirdly strong skill but awkward at some points. Moving on to the morphs, we have Hungry Scythe. Hungry Scythe is just like Death Scythe, but it adds a hot to the end of the skill. Hungry Scythe's hot, while only ticking once every 2 seconds, it can be nice because it keeps up the Disdain Harm passive. This is one of the better long duration skills in the Bone Tyrant skill line to keep up the Disdain Harm passive. Along with this, the actual heal from it's not terrible, however, the same problem occurs with the base morph. Ruinous Scythe. Ruinous Scythe is, well, interesting. You trade the hot for the ability to set enemies off balance and applying the hemorrhaging effect, which in the use case for AoE off balance can be helpful if you have no other source of AoE off balance, and yes, Ruinous Scythe can actually be a good ability for this. Along with this, you can apply hemorrhaging, which applies Minor Mangle. However, Minor Mangle comes from Pulsar, which one tank is probably already using, and off balance comes from around 1 billion different sources, so it's probably already being taken care of. Overall though, Scythe and its morphs are very strong abilities hampered by the requirement of melee. When you can make good use out of these skills, they're extremely strong. However, when you're off taking something, say, like Chimera, and standing away from literally everything, trying to heal by hitting the air isn't fun. Next up for active skills, we have Bone Armor. It's just, well, a major resolve skill. Most of the time, you will never actually need to use this, as major resolve should be kept up by the player running Frostcloak 100% of the time. However, in some content, you will get separated from this person, so it might actually be helpful putting some skill points into this, and some of the morphs can be useful in certain circumstances. Speaking of the morphs, let's start with the boring one. Summoner's Armor gains an increased duration and while active reduces your necromantic summons. This is, well, not very useful for a tank, as you'll probably never be using anything it will reduce the cost of. The increased timer is nice, as it still only takes 10 seconds to generate a corpse. However, you don't really need the increased timer ever. Beckoning Armor is up next. Beckoning Armor and its secondary effect are far more powerful than summoners in some scenarios in the game. Beckoning Armor will attempt to pull and taunt something every 2 seconds when you are hit by a ranged attack. In some content, this can be extremely strong, in others it's completely useless or actually detrimental to the run. You are unable to tell it what you want it to pull, so sometimes it will attempt to pull something that maybe at that point you do not want in the group. Up next, we got Bitter Harvest. Bitter Harvest is probably one of the main reasons you are using this skill tree. For every corpse around you, you can absorb them, generating 2 ult and healing. This has no cooldown, and as long as there's corpse being generated, you basically are getting free ultimate out of thin air. Bitter Harvest and its morphs do decrease damage taken by 3% as well, but that is so minor in most scenarios you won't even really notice it as a tank. I want to start off with the morphs by talking about Dead in Pain, only because you should never use this morph. It gives major protection for the duration, and major protection is one of the easiest defensive buffs for a tank to source. Along with this, you are still generating 2 ultimate. This will make more sense in a second, but now let's move on to Necrotic Potency. Let's talk about Necrotic Potency. Necrotic Potency just increases the base ultimate generation per corpse from 2 to 6. This is extremely strong if and only if you can keep generating corpses. Most trial fights have a lot of small adds that get killed throughout the fight. Necrotic Potency allows you to become an ult battery and end up giving you a not so small amount of ultimate in almost every fight in the game. At the end of the day, you should look at what fights you are doing and how many adds and how much corpse generation you will have throughout the fight to make sure the skill is worth using. On to Bone Totem. Bone Totem, ever since it lost Minor Vol into Graveyard, has become one of my least used skills and doesn't really have much of a use outside of the times you'll need major cowardice and large groups of enemies. Bone Totem in its morphs offer a very strong defensive option, but past that they don't provide much in terms of group utility. Starting off with the morphs, we have Remote Totem. This allows you to place the totem at range, and while this could be nice being able to place it at range, it doesn't gain anything new and is just the same skill, but it can go over there. The main reason this becomes an issue is as a tank, the thing you want to debuff is usually right next to you. Moving on from that, we have Agony Totem. Agony Totem provides a synergy. With subclassing, synergies have become a little bit more scarce as people run more and more actual class skills that don't provide synergies. The synergy itself in terms of damage, I don't have enough information on, but based on the tooltip, it's not horrible. Finally, for the active skills, we have Grave Grasp and Morse. This skill has a lot of words and most of it ends up doing the same thing. Grave Grasp summons 3 patches of skeletal claws that either snare, immobilize, or stun depending on which area they are hit by. All 3 patches apply Minor Maim, which again falls under a very easy buff to source outside of Grave Grasp. The one good upside to this is being able to choose whether you want to snare, immobilize, or stun something, but most of the time you won't really get to choose as you'll just end up hitting something with the snare or the immobilize. Or in the worst case scenario, you'll just get giant cannot be snared, cannot be immobilized, and cannot be stun text on your screen. The first morph I want to talk about is Empowering Grasp, as it's, well, the tanky option. Instead of just Minor Maim, it's now Major Maim and allies get in power. Major Maim is actually a very nice AoE option for it, as single target Major Maim is better to keep up with other skills. However, in AoE, there isn't necessarily a great source of it. Empower, on the other hand, is, well, yeah. People who want it will basically already have it, being able to keep it up with Might of the Guild, and everyone else just isn't heavy attacking, so it doesn't matter. The other morph is, well, just a DPS skill. To be fair to this skill, you can actually use it as a tanking skill, as if you can keep all 3 patches up on a boss, you would get Frost Dot, Frost Damage, Chilled, and a Corpse every time you cast it. However, this is realistically not possible to do in almost any content in the game. But if you can, it's a free Corpse and the Chilled status effect and a bunch of other stuff, so it's actually pretty good. Time to talk about the best part of the skill line. Not really, but you know, whatever. Bone Goliath transformation. While very cool looking, it can actively make your trial content and other content harder due to the fact max HP dots do exist and they're becoming more and more prevalent. Bone Goliath increases your maximum health by 30,000 and restoring that amount instantly, as well as making your light and heavy attacks restore health. 30,000 extra health sounds amazing until you go fight Yas and make it so the dot tick hits you harder than any healer can reasonably keep up with. Ravenous Goliath. Ravenous Goliath gives you a damaging aura that also heals you, and while technically this increases your amount of HPS incoming, it also never outheals the increase in damage you'll be taking in newer content. Pummeling Goliath is in a, well, different spot. Don't get me wrong, it's still, well, terrible. Pummeling Goliath can actually end up in some really stupid conditions where as a DPS skill it's not terrible, and as a tank, if you really want to be kind of dumb with it, you can take it, do damage, and just bash things to death. It is funny, it's not very good, but if you end up in the situation where you can do it, I mean, why not? It does do quite a bit of damage if used right. On to the best part of any build, looking at passives to see if any of them are actually useful. Well, luckily for us as tanks, almost all of the passives in the Bone Tyrant tree are somewhat useful in some way. Starting off, we have Death Gleaning. This is a nice sustained passive, as any enemy within 28 meters of the player that dies restores 666 magicka and stamina. Health Avarice is up next, and if you have noticed, I skipped something. Don't worry about that, but we'll get to it later. Health Avarice just increases healing received by 3% per Bone Tyrant ability slotted. Healing received is just a nice buff as a tank, especially since it's passive. There's not much more to say about this, it's just a pretty nice thing to have. Blast Gasp gives you 2,412 maximum health. For me personally, it's a whatever passive. I like to play tanks with lower and lower health values, as most of the time I just don't care or need the max health. However, this passive does allow me to increase other resources by taking more points out of health and, let's just say, giving it to stamina. This has no trigger and is completely passive. This allows you to build around it and gives you a little bit more flexibility in what you are doing. As for that last passive that we skipped, we have Disdained Harm. This passive is, well, kind of nuts. It's one of the only ways to directly lower dot effects, and it does it by quite a bit. 15% is a lot of mitigation, and with tanks being so tanky towards direct damage already, this is nice to have alongside of it. The downside of this is you will need to take one of the longer lasting Bone Tyrant skills or something you can keep up for the entire fight. Disdained Harm does absolutely nothing if you don't have a Bone Tyrant skill active at all times. This is where the skills like Scythe and Bone Armor come in, as things like Necrotic Potency, though strong, will not be able to keep up this passive 100% of the time unless you have insane corpse generation. Disdained Harm basically makes Bone Tyrant worth taking on its own, as the 15% dot mitigation is extremely strong in a lot of fights. Overall, Bone Tyrant is a very strong tanking line if you really just want to focus on ultimate generation and getting out as many ults as fast as possible. Along with that, it's a good healing option if you aren't off tanking Chimera. I don't know why, but this is just something that upsets me right now, probably because I'm doing it way too much. But anyway, Bone Tyrant is mainly focused on strong defensive options that are, while very, very good, sometimes end up just not being needed. The ultimate in most content is kind of just a joke, either giving way too much survivability for the content or just not having a reason to run it over some other options like Warhorn, Barrier, or literally anything else. Bone Tyrant just comes down to, do you need Disdained Harm and do you want the ulti gen from Necrotic Potency, and does the content allow for it? If it does, there's really no reason not to take it, as Necrotic Potency on its own is extremely strong, Disdained Harm on its own is extremely strong, and it has some good supporting skills. Anyway, that's it for me. Okay, bye.